Welcome back, dear friends, to Family Shadows, a place where stories of love, sacrifice, betrayal, and quiet justice are told in the hope that you may find a piece of your own family reflected here. If you believe in stories that remind us of the value of parents, of respect, and of the lessons hidden in ordinary lives, consider subscribing and joining our growing community. Each week, we share stories that speak not just to the mind but to the heart. And now, let us begin. Henry Walker was 62 years old, and if you met him on the street, you might not remember him after passing by. He dressed plainly, sweaters with sleeves slightly stretched, shirts that had seen too many wash cycles, and shoes polished not for style, but because he still believed a man should take care of what he owned. He carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who had worked hard, raised a family, and asked for little in return. There was a gentleness in Henry, the kind that comes from loss. His wife, Nora, had passed away 5 years ago, and though the world might say 5 years is enough time to move on, Henry never really did. Her absence clung to the walls of the home they once shared, her favorite teacup still in the cabinet, her handwriting still on recipes taped to the fridge, her laughter a ghost that played in his memory on lonely evenings. The gift he held in his hand that evening wasn't just any gift. It was something tied to Nora. A small box, carefully wrapped, with a ribbon he had taken far too long to tie just right. Inside was a delicate silver locket, Nora's locket, that he had kept in his dresser drawer all these years. He wanted to give it to Nicole, his daughter-in-law, as a gesture of welcome, of trust, of family. He believed that by placing something so close to Nora's heart into Nicole's hands, he was not only passing down an heirloom but also extending an olive branch, an invitation into the soul of the Walker family. Henry was not naive. He knew Nicole wasn't particularly fond of him. She was ambitious, modern, always scrolling through her phone, always moving too quickly to notice the old man who preferred silence to small talk. Still, he hoped that maybe, just maybe, a gift like this could soften the invisible wall between them. That evening, the family gathered at Henry's home. Logan, his only son, had urged him to host dinner. "It'll be good, Dad," Logan said. "Nicole's been stressed. Maybe a family dinner will help." Henry prepared the way he always did, with too much food, with the old record player humming in the background, with candles placed on the table though no one seemed to care for them anymore. He brought out the gift after the plates were cleared, his hands trembling slightly as he offered it to Nicole. "I wanted you to have this," Henry said softly, his voice cracked in the quiet room. "It belonged to Nora. She wore it often. I think she would have wanted you to have it." Nicole blinked, a little startled, then took the box with the practiced smile of someone accepting an obligation rather than a treasure. She opened it, glanced at the locket, and her lips curled, not in gratitude but in something closer to disdain. "Oh," she said flatly, "a used necklace." Logan shifted in his chair, embarrassed. "Nicole." But Nicole didn't stop there. She laughed, a short, sharp laugh that seemed to slice through Henry's chest. "You really think I'd wear something like this? It's so old-fashioned. I mean, look at it. It's tarnished, out of date. Honestly, we don't need clutter." Before Henry could respond, before Logan could find the courage to defend his father, Nicole stood, walked into the kitchen, and with the sound of metal against plastic, dropped the box into the trash can. The room fell silent. Henry sat still, his hands folded on his lap, the picture of calm. But inside, a storm raged. That locket had once rested against Nora's skin as they danced in their living room. He remembered the way she would hold it when she was nervous, as though touching it gave her strength. And now it sat beneath discarded napkins and food scraps in his own trash can. He wanted to speak, to shout, to remind Nicole of what respect meant, of what love looked like. But Henry had long ago learned that not every battle could be fought with raised voices. Some, perhaps the most important ones, had to be endured in silence. Logan cleared his throat. Nicole, that was unnecessary. Nicole shrugged, already scrolling through her phone. Come on, Logan, don't make it a big deal, it's just an old trinket. Henry rose quietly, excused himself from the table, and walked outside. The night was cool, the sky painted with faint stars. He closed his eyes, hearing Nora's voice in the echoes of his memory. "You're too soft, Henry," she used to tease him. "But that's what I love about you. You don't fight for yourself, you fight for the people you love." He smiled faintly, even through the ache. Back inside, Nicole laughed at something on her phone, Logan staring at his plate, too ashamed to look at his father. Henry whispered into the night, "Nora, what would you have me do?" Henry lingered outside longer than he needed to. The cool air wrapped around him like a blanket, though not one of comfort, more like the reminder of how alone he was. His hands, roughened by years of work, trembled as he slid them into his pockets. He could still hear the faint sound of laughter drifting from inside the house. Nicole's laughter. The same laugh that only minutes ago had followed the metallic clang of Nora's locket hitting the trash. He stood by the porch railing, staring at the old oak tree he and Nora had planted the year Logan was born. Its branches stretched out like weary arms, still holding firm despite the years. Henry thought of Nora again, how she used to tie a swing for little Logan under that tree, how she would sit nearby with a book, lifting her eyes every few moments just to watch their boy. Now that boy was grown, sitting at the dinner table inside, too tongue-tied to defend his father. Henry didn't resent Logan. He knew his son was caught in an impossible position. But still, there was a quiet sorrow in realizing that no one had stepped in when Nicole tossed away not just a gift, but a piece of Nora's memory. The screen door creaked open behind him. Logan stepped onto the porch, rubbing the back of his neck the way he did when he felt guilty. "Dad," he said softly, "I'm sorry about what just happened." Henry didn't turn right away. He kept his eyes on the oak tree. "You don't have to apologize for her. I know, I should have said something." Logan sighed, leaning against the railing beside his father. "Nicole can be blunt. She doesn't always think about how her words or her actions come across." Henry finally turned to him. "Logan, it wasn't about bluntness. It was about respect. Not for the gift, not even for me, but for your mother." Logan swallowed hard. He looked down at his shoes. "You're right." Silence fell between them, heavy and long. The only sounds were crickets and the faint clinking of dishes from inside. Henry placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Son, I know marriage is complicated. I know you want to keep peace in your home. But peace built on silence can rot a family from the inside." Logan's eyes flicked up, moist but determined. "I'll talk to her, I promise." Henry nodded but said nothing more. He knew promises were easy when guilt was fresh. The real test would be whether Logan had the strength to follow through. When they walked back inside, Nicole was still scrolling through her phone, legs crossed on the couch as if nothing had happened. She barely looked up. Henry pretended not to notice the trash can sitting in the corner of the kitchen, the ribbon from Nora's locket peeking out from under a pile of napkins. He swallowed hard, forcing down the urge to retrieve it right then and there. He told himself there would be time later after they left. He would pull it from the trash, wipe it clean, and return it to its drawer. But the image haunted him, Nora's locket lying beneath grease-stained paper and chicken bones. That night, after the house fell silent, Henry sat alone in his armchair. He stared at the family photograph on the mantel, him, Nora, and a 10-year-old Logan grinning with 2 front teeth missing. He remembered how Nora had clasped the locket around her neck just before the camera clicked. A family heirloom, she'd called it. One day it should belong to the next woman who carries the Walker name. Henry whispered into the quiet room, "Nora, I tried, but she doesn't see it the way you did." His eyes burned, but no tears fell. He had spent years teaching himself how to cry silently, the way men of his generation did, where grief was private, unseen. The next morning, Henry rose early. He always did. He brewed his coffee, fried 2 eggs, and sat at the kitchen table with the newspaper spread before him. But he didn't read it. His eyes kept darting toward the trash bin. The locket still lay there, buried beneath yesterday's refuse. He stood, his chair scraping against the tile. Slowly, almost reverently, he reached in and lifted the box. The ribbon was soiled, the silver locket smudged with grease, but it was intact. He held it in his palm, staring at it for a long time. A thought crossed his mind, not of anger, but of surrender. Perhaps it was better if Nicole never had this. Perhaps Nora's locket was never meant for someone who couldn't understand its weight. And yet, hadn't Nora asked him in her gentle way to pass it on? The conflict tore at Henry all morning. He polished the locket carefully, until it gleamed again, then placed it back in its box. He set it on the mantel, where sunlight from the window caught its edges. Later that day, Logan stopped by. Nicole didn't come, she had errands, or so she said. "You took it back," Logan observed, noticing the box on the mantel. Henry didn't answer right away. He simply said, "Some things don't belong in the trash." Logan's face softened with shame. "Dad, I'll talk to her. She'll understand." Henry studied his son's face, the same face he had once kissed goodnight 1,000 times, the same face that now carried worry lines of adulthood. He wanted to believe Logan. He wanted to trust that his son could bridge the distance between his wife and his father. But deep inside, Henry knew the damage had already been done. He looked at the box again, the glint of silver inside, and thought, respect, once discarded, is not so easily reclaimed. A week later, Logan insisted on hosting dinner at his own home. "It'll be good for us," he told Henry on the phone. "Nicole wants to make it up to you. She's cooking." Henry hesitated, the memory of the locket still raw in his chest, but he agreed. He had never been one to hold grudges, and the thought of refusing an invitation from his son was more painful than the risk of another insult. When he arrived that evening, he carried a pie in a worn ceramic dish, apple, the way Nora used to make it. He had even brushed the crust with milk and sugar, the way she had taught him, so it would glisten golden brown. He thought perhaps this could be a small olive branch of his own. Nicole greeted him at the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Henry," she said, her tone polite but cool, "come in." Her home was sleek, modern, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, and a dining table that looked more like a showroom piece than a place where family meals were shared. Henry felt out of place, his pie dish clutched awkwardly in his hands like something fragile and out of style. Logan came forward quickly, taking the dish from his father. "Smells amazing, Dad. Thanks for bringing this." Henry smiled faintly, his eyes resting on his son's face, searching for some hint of the boy who used to grin at everything he did. But Logan looked tired, shoulders slightly hunched, as if carrying a weight no one else could see. They sat down to dinner. Nicole had prepared roasted chicken, potatoes dressed with rosemary, and a salad so artfully arranged it looked untouched by human hands. The table was perfect. Too perfect. At first, conversation was civil, whether Logan's work, Nicole's new project. Henry nodded politely, chewing slowly, grateful for the food if not the company. Then, somewhere between the main course and dessert, Nicole leaned back in her chair, her glass of wine half empty, and let her words slip like darts. "You know, Henry," she began casually, "we've been trying to clear out some of the clutter around the house. Old furniture, knickknacks, hand-me-downs. It feels good, you know, to make room for things that actually matter." Henry froze, fork hovering midair. He understood. She wasn't talking about furniture. She was talking about the locket about him. Logan shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his father, then back at his wife. "Nicole," but Nicole pressed on. "I mean, life moves forward, doesn't it? We can't just hold on to every dusty relic. Sometimes it's better to let go." Her tone was sweet, almost musical, but the sting was unmistakable. Henry set down his fork gently, the way one might set down something breakable. He folded his hands in his lap and said nothing. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. "Dad," Logan said finally, his voice low. "You know she didn't mean." Henry stopped him with a small shake of the head. "It's all right, son." But it wasn't all right. Not really. In that moment, Henry felt the divide at the table like a canyon opening between them. On one side, Nicole with her polished smile and dismissive tone. On the other, Henry, clutching memories of Nora like lifelines. And in the middle sat Logan, torn, trying desperately to bridge the gap but never daring to leap to either side. Henry excused himself from dessert. He left the pie untouched on the counter, the crust still glistening under the kitchen lights. As he walked out into the cool night, he heard Nicole laugh softly behind him, her voice carrying through the doorway. "See, he takes everything so seriously." Henry didn't turn back. He just kept walking, his heart heavier than his footsteps. And as he reached his car, he whispered again into the night as though Nora could still hear him. "They don't see me anymore. They don't see us." Henry drove home that night in silence, the headlights carving tunnels of light through the darkness. He didn't turn on the radio. He didn't need noise. He needed the quiet, even if the quiet pressed against him like a weight. When he pulled into the driveway, the old house greeted him the way it always did, stoic, weathered, waiting. It was too big for one man now, but Henry refused to leave it. Every wall still carried Nora's touch. The paint colors she chose, the curtains she sewed herself. Even the garden out front, though overgrown, still bore traces of her care. Inside, he hung his coat and set his keys in the little bowl by the door, the same bowl Nora had insisted on because keys deserve a home too. He chuckled faintly at the memory, the sound of her voice slipping through him like a soft breeze. The house was dark except for the lamp by his armchair. He sat down, leaning back with a sigh, and let the silence fill him. But silence has a way of becoming memory, and memory has a way of becoming company. He closed his eyes, and suddenly he was back 20 years earlier, standing in a jewelry shop on Main Street with Nora by his side. She had spotted the silver locket in the glass case, her eyes lighting up the way they always did when something stirred her heart. "It's beautiful," she whispered, fingertips pressed against the glass. Henry remembered teasing her, "It's just a trinket," but she shook her head. "Not to me. Look at it, Henry. It's simple, but it feels like it's meant to hold a story." So he bought it for her even though money was tight back then. and she wore it every Sunday, every family gathering, every time they took a picture. Sometimes she slipped a photo of Logan as a child inside, sometimes a folded scrap of paper with one of Henry's love notes. He could still see her, standing in their living room, fastening the chain behind her neck. She would smile at him, the locket gleaming against her skin, and say, "Now I carry you both right here." She'd tap her chest, right above her heart. Henry opened his eyes, the ache sharp in his chest. The locket wasn't just jewelry. It was Nora's way of keeping the family close, even in moments when the world tried to pull them apart. He rose slowly, walked over to the mantel, and lifted the box. The locket inside caught the light, polished now, restored from the indignity of the trash. He held it in his palm, running his thumb over the delicate engraving, and for a moment he swore he could feel her warmth in it still. "Do you see what they've done, Nora?" he murmured. "They don't understand. They think it's just old silver." The house gave no answer, but Henry felt her presence in the hush around him, in the flicker of the lamp, in the steady rhythm of his own heart. He sat back down, the locket resting in his palm, and let the memories unfurl. He remembered Nora's laughter at family dinners, her voice calling Logan in from the yard, the way she touched Henry's arm in the grocery store aisle as if to say, "We're in this together." And then came the hardest memory of all, the hospital room, the machines, the way her hand felt so small and fragile in his as she whispered her last words. "Promise me, Henry, promise me you'll keep this family together." He had nodded, tears streaming down his face. He had promised. But now, years later, sitting alone in that empty living room, Henry wondered if he had already failed her. The locket felt heavier in his hand, as though it carried not just metal and memory but the weight of his vow. Outside, the wind rustled through the oak tree in the yard, the same tree they had planted when Logan was born. Henry thought of Nora's smile that day, dirt on her hands, joy in her eyes, and he whispered into the quiet, "I'm still trying, Nora. I swear I'm still trying." The following weekend, Henry found himself not at home but at the small-town cafe he used to frequent with Nora. He didn't go often anymore. The place carried too many echoes. But that morning, something pulled him there, maybe the need for human voices after too many nights spent in silence. The cafe hadn't changed much. Same cracked leather booths, same smell of coffee and fried eggs, same chalkboard menu scrawled in the waitress's looping handwriting. Henry slid into a booth, his box tucked carefully in his jacket pocket. He hadn't wanted to leave the locket at home. Lately, he felt uneasy whenever it was out of sight, as though it might vanish like the respect it once carried. "Henry Walker," a voice called. He looked up to see David Carlson, an old friend he hadn't seen in years, walking toward him with the lopsided grin Henry remembered from high school. David had worked in antiques most of his life, owning a small shop downtown. They shook hands warmly, and David slid into the booth across from him. After the usual pleasantries, David's sharp eyes landed on the box Henry had set on the table. "What's that you've got there?" Henry hesitated, but then opened it slowly, revealing the polished silver locket. David's eyebrows shot up. "Well, I'll be damned, do you know what this is?" Henry frowned. "It's Nora's locket. That's all it's ever been." David leaned closer, adjusting his glasses. "Henry, this isn't just some keepsake. This is a Victorian-era piece, handcrafted. Look at the detail in the engraving, the hinge work. I've only ever seen a few like it, and those went for, well, let's just say a small fortune." Henry blinked. "A fortune?" At auction, David continued, "A piece like this could easily fetch tens of thousands, maybe more depending on provenance." The words landed heavy, as if the air had thickened between them. Tens of thousands. Henry looked down at the locket in his palm, the same one Nicole had dismissed as old-fashioned and tossed into the trash. His chest tightened. He hadn't needed the world to put a dollar value on Nora's memory, but now that someone had, the irony cut deeper. David chuckled, shaking his head. "Henry, do you even realize what you've been holding all these years? It's not just sentimental, it's rare. Priceless, really." Henry didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind flashed to Nicole's smirk, her careless toss into the trash can, the greasy napkin swallowing what could have been a family heirloom worth more than her designer handbags and polished countertops combined. The cafe's clatter of dishes and hum of conversation faded into the background. For Henry, there was only the locket, the memory of Nora's hand fastening it around her neck, and the crushing knowledge that what Nicole had treated like garbage was, in truth, beyond value. Later that evening, Henry was at Logan's house again, invited for dinner. Nicole had made an effort, wine glasses polished, candles lit, her smile rehearsed. As they sat down, Henry placed the box gently on the table. He didn't say anything at first. He let the silence speak until curiosity pulled Nicole's eyes toward it. "What's that?" she asked lightly, as though it were nothing. Henry opened it, revealing the locket gleaming under the candlelight. Nicole's lips parted slightly, though her expression was more annoyance than awe. "I thought we got rid of that old thing," she said with a laugh. Logan stiffened. "Nicole." But Henry raised a hand, his voice steady, calm. "I ran into David Carlson today. You remember him, don't you, Logan? He runs the antique shop downtown." Logan nodded slowly. Henry's gaze stayed fixed on Nicole. "He told me this locket could be worth tens of thousands of dollars. That it's a rare piece, priceless, really." The room went utterly silent. Nicole's smirk faltered. Her eyes flicked from the locket to Henry's face, searching for some sign that he was exaggerating. But Henry's expression was unreadable. Logan let out a low whistle. "Tens of thousands." Nicole swallowed hard. You're joking." Henry shook his head. "I'm not." The locket gleamed between them, its polished surface catching the flicker of the candle flame. In that moment, the divide at the dinner table widened into something undeniable. Respect, once discarded, now carried a price tag Nicole could no longer ignore. And Henry, watching her struggle with the truth, felt something shift. Not victory, not vindication, just a quiet, solemn weight. For the first time in years, the silence at that table did not belong to him. Nicole's fork clinked against her plate as her hand trembled. For once, words didn't leap from her lips as quickly as usual. She stared at the locket, her face caught somewhere between disbelief and panic. "Worth tens of thousands," she murmured half to herself. Henry didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch heavy, the truth pressing against her pride like a mirror she didn't want to look into. Logan cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "Nicole, maybe now you see it's not just an old trinket." Nicole's cheeks flushed. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice sharper than she intended. "I couldn't have known." Henry's eyes softened, but his words remained firm. "You didn't want to know, that's the difference." The color drained from Nicole's face. She opened her mouth to protest, but the truth of it silenced her. She hadn't cared enough to ask, to wonder, to even pause before tossing it away. Suddenly, the image came back to her, the careless flick of her wrist, the metallic sound of the box landing in the trash. She remembered the look on Henry's face then, quiet, wounded, but dignified. And now, the memory burned her with shame. She pushed her plate away and stood abruptly. "Excuse me," she muttered, retreating to the kitchen. Logan rubbed his forehead, torn between following her and staying with his father. At last he rose and went after her, leaving Henry alone at the table with the locket glowing softly in the candlelight. From the kitchen, muffled voices rose. "I didn't mean it like that," Nicole hissed. "You threw it in the trash, Nicole," Logan shot back. "Do you understand what that meant? To him, to Mom's memory." Nicole's voice broke. "I thought it was junk. I didn't know it was valuable." "It was always valuable," Logan said bitterly. "You just didn't see it." Henry sat in silence, staring at the locket. He could hear the argument, but he didn't need to. He had lived long enough to know regret when it arrived. It always came too late after the damage was done. Moments later, Nicole reappeared, her eyes red-rimmed, her composure cracked. She stood at the edge of the dining room, hands clasped in front of her like a child called to account. "Henry," she began, her voice trembling, "I owe you an apology, a real one. I was wrong. I disrespected you and Nora. I didn't see what it meant. And now I feel," she faltered, searching for the word, "ashamed." Henry looked at her for a long time, his weathered face unreadable. Then quietly he said, "Apologies are not measured by words, Nicole. They're measured by change." Tears pooled in Nicole's eyes. She nodded, unable to reply. Logan placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her back into her chair. The three of them sat in strained silence, the locket between them like both a wound and a bridge. For the first time since Nora's death, Henry felt that the weight of memory was not his alone to carry. But whether Nicole's regret would grow into respect or fade into convenience was something only time would reveal. The candles flickered, the wine went untouched, and the night stretched long, heavy with the knowledge that the balance of this family had shifted, perhaps forever. The table felt heavier than the meal they hadn't finished. Dishes sat untouched, candles burned low, and the silence seemed to echo louder than words ever could. Nicole's apology lingered in the air, fragile and uncertain, like smoke that hadn't yet cleared. Henry reached for the locket, cradling it in his hand. His thumb moved slowly across its surface, tracing the delicate engravings worn smooth by years of Nora's touch. For a moment, he simply looked at it, as though gathering the strength to speak. "When Nora first wore this," Henry began softly, his voice steady but filled with memory, "she said it wasn't about silver or design. She said it was about carrying family close to her heart. She put a picture of Logan inside when he was just a boy. Later, she tucked in notes I had written. That's what gave it value, not money, not rarity, but the love we poured into it." Nicole stared at the locket, her lips pressed tight. Logan shifted uneasily but kept his gaze fixed on his father, waiting. Henry continued, his tone calm, almost gentle. "Respect isn't about knowing the price of something. It's about knowing its meaning. When you threw this into the trash, Nicole, you didn't just discard metal. You discarded memory. You discarded Nora." Nicole's eyes welled with fresh tears. "I didn't realize, I didn't think." "That's the lesson," Henry interrupted, though his voice was not harsh. "We must think. We must see people not as inconveniences or relics, but as the living threads of the family we share. When we stop seeing one another, when we stop honoring where we come from, we don't just lose objects, we lose ourselves." The room grew still. Even the flicker of the candles seemed to pause, as if the air itself leaned in to listen. Henry placed the locket gently back in the box and closed it. Then he slid the box across the table toward Nicole. Her hands trembled as she stared at it. "You're giving it to me, after everything." Henry nodded. "Nora wanted it passed down, and I still believe in honoring her wishes. But if you keep it, Nicole, understand this. It isn't yours to wear as jewelry. It's yours to guard as history. It's not about you, it's about all of us." Nicole reached out slowly, her fingers brushing the box as though it might burn her. She pulled it toward her chest, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. For once, no excuses came, only silence and a soft nod. Logan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His eyes met his father's, full of gratitude and shame all at once. Henry leaned back in his chair, weary but resolute. Families survive not on wealth or possessions, but on respect. Once that's gone, no fortune can buy it back. No one spoke after that. The lesson had been delivered, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in truth. And truth had a way of settling deeper than any scolding could. The locket's silver gleam, resting now in Nicole's trembling hands, was no longer just a piece of jewelry. It had become a reminder, a silent vow, that respect once discarded must never be discarded again. The night carried on quietly, but something had shifted. Nicole no longer touched her phone. She sat with the box in her hands, as if clutching not just a piece of silver but the weight of a promise. Her shoulders, usually squared in confidence, sloped inward as humility softened her edges. Logan poured a bit more wine into his father's glass, his hand unsteady. "Dad," he said softly, "I should have defended you that first night. I should have told her what that locket meant. I'm sorry." Henry lifted the glass but didn't drink. Instead, he placed a hand on his son's wrist. "Logan, strength isn't about shouting in the moment. It's about standing for what matters, even when it costs you. Learn that and you'll do better than I did." Logan's throat tightened and he nodded, eyes glistening. For the rest of the evening, conversation grew slower, gentler. The family pie Henry had brought weeks earlier had gone untouched, but tonight they cut slices of it, sharing quietly. The crust was flaky, the apples sweet, and for a while it felt as if Nora herself had returned, smiling at the sight of her family finally beginning to heal. When Henry stood to leave, Nicole rose too. She held the box close and whispered, "Thank you for trusting me with this, Henry. I won't forget again. I'll keep it safe for all of us." Henry looked at her for a long moment. In her eyes he no longer saw disdain but a spark of understanding. Not perfect, not complete, but a beginning. He gave a small nod. "That's all I ask." Outside, the night was cool again, the stars faint but steady. As Henry walked to his car, he glanced back at the house, his son's house, his daughter-in-law's house, and felt the faint stirrings of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not victory, not vindication, but hope. He touched his chest, right where the locket had once rested against Nora's heart, and whispered into the night, "We're still keeping the family together, Nora, slowly, quietly, but together." Dear friends, thank you for staying with us through this story. In every family, respect and love are treasures far greater than money or possessions. May this tale remind us all never to take them for granted. From our hearts here at Family Shadows, we wish you health, peace, and happiness with your loved ones. Cherish your family, for they are truly priceless. Until next time, stay well, and may your homes always be filled with respect and love.